Hello and welcome to another episode of the Anxiety RX podcast. I am, as you probably know, your host, Dr. Russell Kennedy, a physician who suffered from crippling anxiety for many, many years as a result of growing up with a father with schizophrenia and bipolar disease. He was never abusive or violent, but just the fact that he would go psychotic, I would lose this frame of reference on my life and I would just dissociate on some level. And I'm going to talk today with my guest, Danielle, who suffered from anxiety for many years, and she's going to tell you her story. It's quite captivating, actually. We were talking a little bit before we came on. So welcome, Danielle. Happy to have a fellow Canadian from Ottawa here.
Yes, welcome. Really good to be here.
So tell us a little about, how what you were telling me, like how you grew up. I guess you were
Yep.
the fifth child, you said, and it was like, the family was already stressed with four children, and then, you come along.
Yes. Well, I I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father was an alcoholic and there are other alcoholics in my home, but my father was also a very angry person.
Mm,
He grew up in a terrible environment, as did my mother. And so, they could only give what they had, which wasn't a lot. So this
right.
really isn't about them, but it's about their impact on me based on what they had to give me. So I grew up as I was the fifth child, and my father's drinking was really bad at the time. And my mother ended up pregnant with me, and I was, of course, fifth child. So I was already unwanted and unwelcome right from utero. And so I was born into this family that was very chaotic. Everything was chaotic about this environment. And I just lived and breathed fear, I'm sure,
Mm,
from the moment that I was born. And so there was no one really to attach to. There was no connection that I was able to make, no loving connections or no ability to, regulate or have someone help me emotionally at all. I actually have two siblings. I'm so grateful that I have them because if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have had very much loving care in that home, but they managed to help me quite a bit. So my anxiety started when I was about 12 years old. My mother got sick and was in the hospital, and I was going to be alone for with my father in that house. And I was terrified that night that I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how much drinking he was going to be doing. I didn't know if he was going to be raging that day or whatever. It was just so unpredictable at 12 years old. I had no way of knowing what was going on. And in my mind, I always felt like my father was going to kill me. So
wow.
I'm sure that that's not true now as an adult, but
But
his
as a
rage was
child, if that was your perception,
that was my perception. So I walked on eggshells trying never to upset him because I didn't know when that rage was going to kick off and it would if it was, you know, if it would result in him like physically harming me or killing me like in my little young mind, that's what I was thinking. So I had so much fear. And so I remember that day my mom went to the hospital and I was alone with my dad at the house. And obviously I had intense anxiety, which I had sort of had my whole life. And I started having these strange experiences that I now know are dissociation. But at the
mm,
time, I didn't know what they were. So I was in my bedroom. I ran into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror because suddenly I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize my hands. I didn't recognize my face. I didn't recognize anything. My voice sounded different. And so I felt like I was outside of myself, watching myself. And this panic was just overwhelming. And I started splashing cold water in my face. I started hitting myself in the face. I actually took off running down the street. I didn't know. I felt totally crazy. I couldn't get this feeling away from me that this anxiety was just so incredibly overwhelming. And so that was the start of my life of panic and also my start of agoraphobia. And
yeah,
I started really minimizing my ability to go places because that experience was going to happen over and over again.
sure.
And so at the time, not understanding what was really happening to me, I started thinking, okay, this is happening when I'm in school. I can't go to school. This happens now in the mall. I can't go to the mall. I can't go to my friends. And so everywhere it started to happen, I started saying it has to be that thing. And
Mhm.
so I started avoiding all of those things. And so for many years, I was a housebound agoraphobic. I at times couldn't open the door to get my mail from the side of my house. I My life was so restricted. And so I noticed when I was under a great deal of stress, my panic disorder was worse, my agoraphobia was worse, my generalized anxiety was worse, but I had no idea how to fix it. So I started going to therapy, when I was 12. When I first started going,
Like talk therapy, Danielle? Like,
yeah, I
yeah.
actually ended up getting recommended to get some medication. And they called it at the time, you probably know better than me, but I don't think it was in the DSM at the time. So it was called hysteria.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I was diagnosed with
Yeah.
hysteria at 12 years old. And I was given like medication after medication after medication, but it didn't help anything because I still couldn't go anywhere.
Mm,
The fear was so overwhelming in my little body. I just couldn't manage. And the pills weren't weren't cutting it.
mm.
And I was still living in this very chaotic environment in this house. My dad never quit drinking until he was almost, until he passed away, really, just shy
Mhm.
of that. But so nothing really changed. I started with some talk therapy, which gave me some relief. But really, it was just like this incredible attachment that I needed. I needed someone to listen to me. I needed someone to care what was going on with me. And so it didn't treat my anxiety whatsoever. But I got some relief just feeling like someone gave a damn about what was going on with me. And I was so young, I had no idea. So when I started, zooming ahead, actually, I'll go a little bit more. I had all kinds of treatments and I did do talk therapy for many years. And I couldn't figure out what was going on because I go for this talk therapy and I went for a long time. And it was very strange because I would talk about this and sometimes I could see the therapists getting all teary when I'm sharing my story. And I felt nothing. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's been years I've talked about this. It must be why I'm kind of like over it now. And I have no emotional, I have nothing emotionally anymore. And so every time I go to talk therapy, what I wanted was that connection with a person who cared. But they were like, really like quite surprised that I was even functioning with everything that was going on as a
Exactly.
young
Yeah.
kid.
Sure.
So I ended up there was a program here in Ottawa. We have a psychiatric hospital, Royal Ottawa Hospital.
Mm.
And so they were holding a special anxiety disorder clinic. And I was like, oh my gosh, finally, I'm going to go take this course. So I took the course. And in the end, I was like 10 or 12 weeks, and we were probably 10 or 12 people. And in the end, people made improvements except me.
Mm.
And so I couldn't get any traction in my anxiety. I just couldn't still function. And so I was asked if I would do a TV show with the person that was hosting it. And I can't remember her name right now, but she was a psychologist that was working at the Royal Ottawa at the time. And she said, in exchange, like, we'll do this work together. And would you be interested in doing this TV show? So I ended up doing a TV show on TVO. They followed me around at one of the big malls here and, were trying to give me some techniques on how to, work like exposure therapy sort of
Right.
techniques. And, it was terrifying. And I was clutching with all my strength trying to get through the mall. And in the end, I got through the mall. But as soon as the program was over, I was right back to where I started from. It didn't help me at all. So the next, not too long after that, I was contacted again by them and they said David Suzuki was going to be running a special and if I would mind participating in that show. So I did a portion, I did a series that he did a series on emotions and he did one on fear. And I also did that. And again, nothing, no relief for me, no real benefit.
Mm,
But my hope was that at least it would comfort someone in knowing they weren't alone, you know? And I also, because I was just so crippled by this fear in my life, I actually had 2 kids. And so they were doing a genetic study on panic disorder and anxiety. So I got my parents somehow to agree to give some blood, and I did. And then my children. So we did this genetic study and we participated in that. Again, I knew there would be no benefit for me, but I was hoping someday someone would figure out what was going on with me or someone. But none of these things helped me ever. I
right.
was on medication for a very long time. I've probably tried every SSRI that was in the book at the time and all
Me
kinds of
too.
other things with terrible side effects.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is I'm taking this medication for anxiety. My anxiety is still there. And I have now an additional, 5 very serious side effects
From the
from the
medication.
medication that I'm
Yeah.
taking.
Yeah.
So this craziness and madness went on for a very long time.
Yeah.
And, um, that sort of brings me around the time I'm just zooming ahead because I'm going to be
Sure.
58 next week. And so what happened was at the beginning, I went through a very, very serious, like very painful experience at the end of last year. And during that time, I recognized some of the childhood trauma that I was
Mm,
experiencing. So I said to myself, okay, clearly this is not over. Clearly there is something still there. You can talk about it like it happened to someone else. It's actually ruining your relationships. And so it's time to really heal from some of that childhood trauma because up until then, I didn't even really recognize that I had any. I thought I was over it. We talked
mm.
about this already. Am I not over it already?
Yeah, the
So,
key word was talk,
yeah,
right? So
I
it's like,
talked and
yeah,
talked and
talking
talked.
doesn't
Yeah,
get it.
like
Talking,
decades.
as you said, when you talk to a counselor or a therapist that's empathic and connected,
Yes,
yeah, you'll get the feeling of connection that you so badly wanted when you were a child.
yes,
Like there's so many things. Like when I talk to people, Danielle, I write stuff down and I've written down like 15 things. I'll never get to them all. But the first thing that I thought is like you weren't safe even in utero. Like you said when you were born, you
no,
weren't safe. You weren't safe even in
no,
utero, right? The
no.
other thing that my friend Mark Willin talks about, he wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You about intergenerational trauma. Like you didn't have an invitation to exist either, right? So
No.
it's so important, and I'm so like kind of emotional about this for you because I'm so happy that you found something in my work that actually gave you that ability to start looking after yourself, to give yourself that attachment, which is kind
Yes,
of, it's a funny thing because we do need the attachment from other people, but we also need that attachment from ourselves. And this is kind of the catch 22 in a way, in that we need other people to show us
yes,
that we're loved and show us that we're attached to. And then we get that template and then we use that template to give it to ourselves. So if we don't
yes,
get that template initially, we don't have the template to do it to ourselves. And on top of that, we look at the negative feeling we have inside us and we judge ourselves for that. So we're like,
yes.
there's like, I thought I was so defective for so long because I would go to all these therapies. I would go to talk therapy, CBT, all these different therapies, do psychedelics, all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't getting any better. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm just defective. I guess that there's
Yeah,
just no help for me. Right. So
yes,
that's when I had to start going, okay, the medical profession and the psychological profession is not going to help me. I'm going to have to do this for myself. So gratefully, I do have my background as a medical doctor and my background in neuroscience. It's like, okay, how am I going to fix this? So
mhm,
I did like LSD, ayahuasca, all these things are like 15 years ago, but they showed me that what I called my anxiety was actually the state of alarm that's in my
yes,
body. And that alarm basically shuts off parts of your brain. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, the part of your brain that would recognize you and be connected and comforted by you, by your presence, wasn't there. So, of
mhm,
course, you're going to feel depersonalization and derealization. And then when you come back into this more calm, connected state, you kind of see, oh, what was that all about? That was just so weird. And then the other
yeah,
thing was coupling. We call this coupling is when you go on the bus and you have a panic attack. So you assume the bus, the evil
yes,
bus, is the cause of the
yes,
panic attack. So you avoid
totally.
buses, right?
Yes,
So, but it's just our cognitive minds are so, they're searching and searching and searching for this answer. It's like, oh, it must be the
Yes.
bus. Oh, it must be this friend's house. And it's not that. It's basically this internal sense of alarm, which essentially has separated you from yourself. And then when you're separated from yourself, you just create this alarm, which of course feeds the entire cycle over and over again. And until we start treating and recognizing the alarm, which is a younger version of you that needs to be seen, heard, loved, and protected, that's only actually heal the root cause of the alarm rather than trying to fix the anxiety. So many therapies try to fix the anxiety of the mind, and the anxiety of the mind is just the byproduct. Like it's not the actual cause. But because
Yep.
we're so used to being cognitive beings and we have this worry and then we have this fear in our chest, we think, oh, the worry caused the fear. But it's actually, if you look back, because we're much
Mm.
better at describing things in cognitive terms than feeling ones, we assume that it's the cognitive worry that caused the problem when actually the fear was there before, the alarm was there before. So the alarm causes the worries, and the worries never allow you to feel safe enough to actually deal with the alarm. So that's my rant. So we both had our thing, but it's just fascinating to talk to you. And again, I'm just so happy that I was able to help you feel better and feel connected to yourself. So
Yes.
it's so wonderful for me. Like, this is why I do this, is that I want and you have the same feeling, right? I want to
Yes, I
help
do.
other people. I see this all the time. I want to help other people not have to suffer with 40 years of
Yes.
anxiety like I did.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been quite the journey, and you know, like 45 years of my life has been wasted, on a lot of this because I literally couldn't go anywhere and I couldn't
Yeah.
do anything. Just normal behavior. I ended up sort of being a more of a functional agoraphobic down the road.
Mm,
But it was a pretty lonely existence, and there was like a lot of things that I just wasn't able to do. And I've done some
yeah.
crazy stuff. I got on a train once and I had them back up the train to let me off. I just faked a heart attack and they moved it back and got me off. And
Sorry for
yeah,
laughing, but
I jumped off a, a catamaran boat because I decided at the last minute I couldn't be stuck on this boat and I almost got stuck in the middle.
okay.
So everybody, yeah, like I've done crazy things just trying to get myself out of anxious situations
Sure.
that I was pushing myself to do with these cognitive tools that weren't working. They
Right.
weren't working.
Because we need the
So
safety first. Like, that's the thing. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, but we need the safety first. Like, people think, oh, we'll fix the thoughts first, and then the safety will come in your body. It's like, no, 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 no. You have
no,
to get the safety in your body first, because there's no
yes,
grounding in your thoughts. In Ayurvedic medicine, they call thoughts vata, vata. Like it's air. It's not. There's no
mm,
grounding in your thoughts. So you
yeah,
have to sort of ground in your body first, and it's much more effective to ground in your body to soothe your mind than it is to try and use your mind to soothe your body.
mhm, yeah, oh yeah, for sure. So my journey, where I sort of came across you was as I was recovering from this very, challenging situation from last year, I started practicing meditation.
Mm,
And so, meditation when you're full of anxiety is like almost
hard.
impossible. But I was just beyond full of anxiety. So I was
Right.
doing like 5-minute little meditation pieces just to give myself some relief. By the time I found your book, I was a mess. I was just a complete mess. I felt hopeless. By then I realized that, something is really wrong and I don't know how to fix this. I have done every kind of treatment, every kind of medication. I am no better than I was when I was 12 years old, except worse because I'm associated a lot more things with
Right.
places I can't go to.
Right. Yeah.
So I ended up, I don't know how I came across your book, but I usually buy the audiobook. So I think I got the audiobook and then I had to order the book because I just devoured it
Mm,
immediately. And some of the things that really stood out for me was, a lot of people with anxiety disorder grew up in very chaotic homes
yes.
with alcoholic parents. And I'm like, damn it, oh my God, this guy's talking to me. It was
Mm,
like literally you were talking to me, like you were watching it on my life in this chaotic home that was creating all this anxiety for me. So that was the first piece. And then when I started reading a little bit more about, the alarm acronym and realizing the different types of abuse that I've gone through, physical, emotional, sexual, and verbal and, the whole acronym, the
Neglect,
loss and
bullying. Yeah.
neglect and bullying
Yeah.
and abandonment and rejection. And like, as I'm going through that and I'm like, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. All of a sudden I realized, oh my God, I still have all this trauma in my body. It's still all here because I had no way to get rid of it. And all this anxiety was stored between my solar plexus and my belly button. And it was
Mm.
just stuck there like 45 years or 50 some years of just these emotions that had nowhere to go. And this pain from this little kid that was too young to process all of these very painful feelings. So I realized, oh my God, I've been beating myself up and putting myself down because I'm weak, because I have anxiety and, what's wrong with me? And I'm broken and I'm never going to be better. And it switched and suddenly I had compassion. I was like, oh my God, all this stuff is still here. This is why I'm doing this. So I started looking for the alarms and I
Mm.
started realizing, okay, when I'm feeling this anxiety and panic, where is it? And I realized for me, it was right in my solar plexus and across, like under my ribs, on both
Mhm.
sides. And so it was like, that's where my pain is. It's here. And so I kept reading and I kept listening to your book. And I was like, everything, these lights were going off. And that compassion that I started to have for myself was so incredible. And then instill as I still kept on reading, I saw that, alarm anxiety cycle. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I'm doing. I'm setting off this alarm. When I think about, going somewhere, it's my body's reaction to this, you know, trauma or stress. It's like there's a little voice inside that says, don't forget about me. You still like, there's a reason why
Yeah.
we're afraid to do these things. And so I started being more curious about, where is that fear? Why is that there? And so I ended up having an opportunity to go on a trip to Europe. This is something I can't even leave my house. I can't go to the grocery store in your car and not take your keys. I can't go anywhere. How am I going to ever do a trip to Europe? So my family was like, "You've got to go. You are the strongest person I know. If anybody can do this, you can." And I'm like, "No, I can't. I had no tools." So anyway, by about April, when I found your book, I switched the meditations that I was doing for the ones in the MBRX program.
Mm.
That was a game changer. I did the yoga nidra every day, my 30, and I did it no longer for 5 minutes. So every morning since then, and probably forever, I switched between the yoga nidra and
Find the
the
alarm in your body.
release, the release. Oh gosh, what was that called? Oh my gosh,
Release of the alarm.
releasing resistance.
Oh, releasing resistance. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that one. So every time, and I'll tell you why, because I realized with all of these emotions, and this became my way out of the insanity of panic disorder, was realizing in the moment that I needed to cut off my thinking immediately. I
Yes.
could not allow myself to think. So as
Absolutely.
soon as the spiral was going to go, and I knew that, oh my God, how am I going to get out of here? I need to find a way out. I'm stuck. I'm trapped, whatever. I had to immediately stop thinking and get very present in my body. And when I did that, I was in the present moment. I wasn't in
Hmm.
the future. I wasn't in the past. I was just in today. I would feel for that alarm and I would give myself so much compassion. I didn't always understand why, why am I feeling so afraid? I'm walking down these stairs, or, it didn't even matter anymore. It just was there and it needed attention. And so, I ended up deciding to go to Europe, and there were like this long list of things that I was on a tour bus. I took a plane. I did,
Did you get the backup? Did you get them to back up the train and get off?
Oh, I did river cruises. I did the subway, the metro at rush hour. I traveled all over Paris. Like, I did the most amazing things, but I did them using the tools that I learned from your book. And one of the things was those meditations every morning for 30 minutes, switching between those two main ones for me, the yoga nidra and the
Hmm.
nidra and the releasing.
Resistance.
I
Yeah.
found it was like an onion, and every day, without even realizing it, I was creating peace inside my body. And I was creating this connection. And I was starving the future and I was starving the past. And I was really present in that moment. And I was really connecting quite compassionately with all the suffering that I had gone through. And so I started creating this really sort of beautiful space for myself. So when the trip came, I still had, all the anxiety. I still had, I was still agoraphobic, all these things. But I started now having to take your show, the book on the road with me and start putting into practice these things. And I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I was going to have you with me and I knew I was going to use these tools and I was going to make it. And so what I did was I kept doing that. I kept starving off the future. I kept
Mm,
cutting off my mind from this spiral. And I knew that if I didn't do the anxiety cycle, that I could deal with the present moment feelings. It was the
totally.
thinking that was getting me crazy. So I would get very present. So everything I was doing, like, if I was going to go on the plane, this is going to sound really crazy, but you know, I'm usually full of anticipation way beforehand. So I would cut off my thinking, I'd get very present, and I would literally open my hands and I would say, I see you, fear.
Yeah.
I feel you here. And you can stay here as long as you want. As long as you need to stay here, I'm listening. I'm here. We're not going anywhere. We might slow down. We might take a few breaths, but we are going to stay with these feelings until you're no longer fearful. And as long as I would not get wrapped up in the future with my mind, I could cope with my present moment and the feelings in my body with the techniques that I was learning and all of the sort of, the releases in the end. So I did that. I actually recorded myself before I was going to do something scary. And
Hmm.
I'd record myself, like, for example, recorded myself getting on a train by myself in
Right.
Amsterdam. Then I recorded myself on the train in Amsterdam. And then I recorded myself getting off. And it was like, okay, I'm on the train. And now, I'm getting off. And this is the level of fear I was experiencing. After about 3 days, I noticed something. I noticed that of these, let's say, 30 experiences that I was dreading on this trip, that what I was really avoiding was feeling afraid.
Mm,
That was really it. I was all of these things. The common denominator wasn't the train and the metro and all these things. I didn't know how to feel anything. I didn't know how to feel. And so, because the feelings were so overwhelming as a little kid, I would just avoid those feelings by doing anything except feeling.
yeah.
So, when I started welcoming those emotions, they didn't stay forever. I would welcome them. And in fact, that song, Hello, Darkness, My Old Friend,
Yes.
I would
Yeah.
actually sing that to myself,
Yeah.
like,
Sure.
hello, anxiety, my old friend. And I would
Yeah.
sing that and I would just feel this peace coming over in the present moment.
Because I
And
think
so,
you're talking when you're making those tapes, you're actually talking to little Danielle.
yeah.
Like that's really what you're doing is you're reassuring her because so often what we do with anxiety is we go up into our heads because we believe that our heads are going to find the answer, which they never
Yes.
do. But when we do that, we abandon the alarm, which is basically little Danielle. So the more
Yes.
you connect with little Danielle, the more you're actually getting at the root source of the issue because, your amygdala and the insula in your brain basically make a representation of fear that was probably very much what's going to happen with dad today. So you have that. So
Yes.
when you get that feeling again or the anticipation, you will go back. You may not know it, but you will go back to the same body state that you had when you were alone with your dad and he was
Yeah.
drinking or whatever. So we turn into a 12-year-old. or an 8-year-old
Yes.
or whatever. But we don't
Yeah.
realize that we turn. And then what we do is we judge that little 8-year-old or 12-year-old for being weak or being whatever. So that's one of the big things about anxiety is it makes you overestimate threat and
Mhm.
underestimate your resources. And people with anxiety are probably the strongest people I know because they
Yeah.
do eventually go to Europe. They do eventually they have to, go to school, raise their kids, make dinner, but we have to do it with 100 pounds of fear on our back. So we learn
Yes.
how to be resilient. But the paradox there is that we've learned this incredible resilience, but we never actually allow ourselves to believe it.
Mhm.
So we get
Yeah.
stuck in this thing. So we get stuck in this sort of thing. And I love what you say about starving the future. I'm going to steal that for sure, because that's basically what you're doing is that you're allowing yourself to feel that alarm. So when you allow yourself to feel it instead of running away into your head all the time, you're starting to truly metabolize it and truly bring it into your consciousness and awareness. And really, and what you're saying is, look, little Danielle, I accept you. I'm here for you. I will look after you because I say fundamentally what anxiety is really a state of alarm. It separates your mind from your body. So you go up into your head, you live in your head, and it separates your adult self from your child self. So the child self holds all our pain. So the adult doesn't want to go back to the child because the child holds all our pain. And the child doesn't trust the adult because we've left them alone often for decades. So of
Yes.
course, this internal separation, Gordon Neufeld talks about this. All anxiety is separation anxiety, and all alarm is separation alarm. So it's like if you can connect with that younger version of you, as kind of woo as this sounds, that's what's going to heal you rather than your coping strategy of going up into worry. Because it
Yes.
does for a millisecond, actually, worry makes the uncertain appear a little more certain. And so we
Mhm.
get a little dopamine hit in our brain from that. But then what we worry about, we start consciously believing it's like, okay, well, this is going to happen. This plane is going to crash, whatever's going to happen. And then we lose it. We're trapped in our heads again. And we have to metabolize and stay with that feeling in our body because that's the root cause. When we metabolize that cause, we have so much more power to starve the future because over the
Yeah.
course of time, we learn, hey, you know what? I don't actually have to think here. I can actually stay with this. And then you start feeling empowered because it's like, as much as this hurts, and I say this, to go to your body, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts, because that's basically you connecting with the younger version of yourself and then giving
Yes.
that child the attention, love, and attachment now that it's so badly needed back then. And that's how you heal the root cause of anxiety rather than just shuffle the deck chairs around on the sinking ship trying to fix your thoughts because it's just an impossible you can't fix your thoughts, like you just can't do it.
No. That's why I had to cut them off completely.
Yeah.
I couldn't even dance around them. I didn't as soon as I would start thinking, I knew I had to break that cycle, and I just would not allow myself to go up in my mind and try to think my way through. I just got really present in my body. And what I found was, after I got on the plane and did this technique, and really just allowed all these feelings to be present and no mind, after I did it, maybe, you know, like the first 3 days, let's say, out of my 3-week trip,
Hmm.
all of a sudden it was like a domino. And I realized I have no more fear. I was no longer afraid. And I knew in that moment I had done this major transformation. I had no fear. I was not afraid of anything. And so I tested it and it was like, okay, I'm going to go down into the metro like at rush
Right.
hour. And I was
Yeah.
down there in the metro and I was giggling to myself because I'm like, oh my God, I feel nothing.
Mm.
Like I have no fear. I don't have an urge to run and hide and panic and nothing. I realized I was just afraid of emotion. And once I realized I could process the emotion, most of the time it didn't last more than like, if I'm running from it, it's like it drags on forever. But if
Yeah.
I sit and just allow it and really welcome it, it lasts very brief and it's very tolerable. So
And you learn
I ended up,
confidence. Yeah. I think that's what happens, Daniel, is you learn this confidence that's in you because, through our lives with anxiety is we build this tremendous resilience in us. Cause like I was saying before, we have to do everything everyone else does, raise our kids and make our dinner and all that kind
yeah,
of stuff. We build this tremendous resilience, but we don't believe it. So when we
Yeah.
start doing things like this, and the resilience is there, it's just that we don't believe it. And then once we start believing it, we can actually sort of flow into I've been in training for the Olympics for this for my whole life. Now I know what this feels like. Now I know I have this reservoir and I can depend on myself rather than some medication or some doctor or some program or some supplement. And all those things are fine. There's nothing wrong with
Yes.
those things, but really it has to come from you. And I see all these ways of sort of helping people with anxiety that if they don't actually treat that disconnection of adult self to child self, yeah, you can fix your diet, you can fix all that sort of stuff. But if you don't actually go in and find that younger version of you that felt abandoned, alone, rejected, whatever, and bring them up to the surface and starve the thoughts, as you said, starve the future, you never heal from it because you don't actually deal with the underlying cause.
Yes. I did all of that, by the way, with no
Yeah.
medication even. I didn't
Yeah.
take medication.
Nice.
So it was like I had it. I had all kinds of it with
Sure.
me, but I didn't need it. And so I ended up coming back from that trip and my family was like, "What the heck happened to you?"
Did you go by yourself? Who did you go with?
Went with a girlfriend who
Okay.
invited me on this trip and we didn't
Okay.
really know each other. So anyway, she became such a healing part of my journey. She had no idea,
Right.
but I'm so grateful to her. But I came back a completely different person and I knew it.
Mm.
People would say that. "What happened to you? You're so different." My brother has a pontoon boat and when I got back, he's like, "Hey, we were supposed to go out on the pontoon boat. Last time you went out on the boat, it
Mm.
was kind of hard for you." I said, "No problem. Let's
Yeah.
go." And so we're driving out there and it's about an hour away. And I said, "Oh, I'm starting to feel a bit anxious." And my sister-in-law and my brother said, "Oh, we didn't want to mention anything." I
Right.
said, "It's okay. I got this." I said, "It's okay that I'm anxious. I've been like this 40, like
Yeah.
whatever, 50 some years.
Say
It's okay that I feel anxious. There's a memory there of me going on that boat, and having a lot of anxiety, but it's okay. I'm okay that I have the anxiety because I have the tools now to be able to work through it." I got there. They were skeptical, but I got there. I got on the boat and they were like, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm
yeah.
great."
Yeah.
We pulled away. We spent 5 hours on the pontoon boat. I had no ability to get back to shore. My brother
Mm.
was driving the boat. So they were like, "Oh my God, I can't." Like they just couldn't believe it.
Right.
And then I was invited about a week later to do whitewater rafting.
Whoa.
And I was like, "Okay." So my new motto in life is yes. All right.
Nice.
Do you want to do this thing? And it's like, yes, I do. I do want to go whitewater rafting.
Is
And I
that
don't know
Niagara
how to
River?
swim.
The Niagara
It's
River? Is that?
the Ottawa River.
Oh, okay.
Ottawa River. And I don't even know how to swim. But it's
Whoa.
like, yeah, I'm going. I'm not,
Nice.
I'm saying yes to as many things in my life as I can now because I literally, I have twinges of fear now, but I
Mm.
know with 100% certainty that I'm going to be okay.
People are going to think I paid you to do this.
Probably. But
It's
you
such
know
a
what?
ringing endorsement. It's like I just you get this warm, tingly feeling all over because this is kind of why I do this, right? Because I really want to change people's lives, and I don't want people to have to suffer for decades with
I
anxiety
know.
like I did. It just warms my heart to see that we don't have to rely on doctors, and there's nothing wrong with doctors. I have no problem with
Yes,
medical doctors, and in fact,
needed
there's
them
what you
myself.
what you said earlier on. Like, there's a lot of people that I had in my practice running around with Xanax in their pocket because
Yep.
they didn't have to use it, but they just
Yep.
knew it was there if they needed it,
Yes.
right? And I
Yes.
think after a while, you become your own Xanax. You become your
Yes.
own, Ativan because you're like, oh, okay, you know what? Yeah, I can actually enjoy this feeling of alarm. And this is the other thing is what I get people to do is I often get them to replace the word anxiety with alarm. So it's like
Hmm.
if you say, because if you're out with someone or you're explaining to someone, oh, I'm feeling anxious today, they may not have any idea what anxiety feels like. But if
Yeah.
you say, I'm feeling alarmed today,
Hmm.
everyone knows what alarm feels like because everyone's been
Yeah.
alarmed. And it just words have consciousness to them. So when you say anxiety, it doesn't really have a whole lot of consciousness to it, but alarm absolutely has consciousness to it. So it's
Yeah.
like we're healing our alarm is basically what we're doing. And the alarm is just that younger version of us that just didn't get the attachment that we needed. And some
Yeah.
people, they say, my parents are great. I had really good parents, but some people are just born really sensitive and they
Mhm.
need more love than the average kind of person. Like you have two
Yeah.
kids. Are they different temperamentally?
Very,
Yes. Same
very,
with my
very,
brother
very.
and I. Like I'm the really sensitive one. And he's like,
Yep.
whatever. He's more thick skinned than I am. And it's funny how
Yep.
that happens in families. Like one seems to be
Yep.
the kind of more sensitive one, and the other one's like, oh, whatever, that kind
Yep.
of thing. So it's just, yeah, it's just such a. So what do you think really made the difference for you? Like if you took a second and you said, what do you think really made the difference between, you know, scared Danielle, not, panicked about going on a trip and just Danielle now? It's like, okay, this is what's happened. Like, what do you think inside of you is the different? What's the difference?
I honored the trauma.
Okay.
I honored the trauma and I gave myself a lot of compassion for that trauma. So that was probably my first piece, cutting off and starving my future, really
Mm,
trying to be present more in today. And because I was always worried about tomorrow,
me
always
too.
worried about everything.
Me
And I
too.
was never present today. So I really make an effort to starve off my future and my past and really stay present in this day. And I can. And sometimes it's like, can I be okay for 30 seconds? Yes, I can.
Yeah.
I can be okay right now. And the regular practice of those meditations that are in that program,
Mm,
very, very, very therapeutic for me. I never miss. Every morning before I even get out of bed, I reach for my phone. I have those meditations on 30 minutes, and that's how I start my day, is connecting to myself and healing and really just allowing whatever tension and anxiety that I have before even starting the day. I sort of get rid of that right from the beginning of my day and not avoiding anything.
hmm
So as soon as I realize, okay, there's some fear there, I go towards that fear and I say, okay, it's okay that I have that fear. And I really try to see where it's coming from. But I have a lot more confidence. It's like I said, it was like a domino effect when I realized you're just afraid of emotion.
Yeah.
Another little side note was, I realized that I also did that with grief. I didn't allow myself to feel grief. So when there was some, like any emotion, really, like any painful emotion, I would do anything to avoid them, just like I would do anything to avoid the mall and the train and whatever was creating any kind of bad emotion, I would avoid, including grief. So I started recognizing these patterns in how I was processing emotion in my body, and I changed it. And I said, grief, you're okay here. We
Mm,
got you. I got you. It's okay that you have grief. It's okay that you have whatever uncomfortable feelings are there. We'll get through it. And so I started allowing myself to just feel, period. Was something I never really allowed myself to do. And it was critical in, it felt weird Googling, like, how do I feel? Like, how does how do you not know
yeah.
that? But
Yeah.
I didn't know how to feel. I just sucked everything inside and kept it all like, you know, stuck in my solar plexus. No wonder I had so much anxiety.
Yeah. And avoidance does give you a temporary hit of, dopamine, endorphins, and kephalins, whatever your brain's natural morphine, because it does give you this sense like, oh, okay, I'm avoiding per second. Like I'm avoiding this pain, but it just winds up building and building and building and building. And it's so counterproductive because if you can just learn how to go after it, what I would say is that instead of going after the fear directly, go to the child first. And then
Yeah.
together we are going to go, to
Yeah.
the fear. There is this thing that my daughter also struggles with a bit of anxiety, not nearly as much as me, but I don't know if it's genetic. I don't know if I molded it for her or whatever. But she says, Dad, my favorite tip of yours is saying, am I safe in this moment? Or I am
Mhm.
safe in this moment, that I put in the book
Mhm.
as well, because
Yeah.
that's her favorite tip out of all of it. She says, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm, worried about my kids, worried about money, whatever it is. It's like, am I safe? I know I'm, worried about the dentist tomorrow, or, how my kids are going to, get out of the car and go to school. But in this actual moment that I'm in, like, am I safe right now? And I think when we do that, we actually focus on these little islands of safety that we
Mhm.
create for ourselves. And eventually it congeals into kind of a landmass where we feel that's, that was the image that I was getting when I was talking with you. Like you started off with these little islands of safety, and then you
Yeah.
congeal them into this landmass where you feel, confident within yourself that you can actually handle the alarm. And I think it's such a huge mountain to get over for so many people, is because when you do have physical, emotional, sexual abuse, it's a huge amount of alarm. And it's so
Mhm.
hard to sort of, I call it getting fully around it, getting around the other side, because so you get up halfway up and it's like, I can't do this. I got to get off the train, whatever it is. I got to jump
Yeah.
back, and you get rewarded for that. So it's
Yeah.
just it's such a process that I wanted to write in the book, in the program. It's like, you can actually go into this. And if it's way too much, then, get a somatic therapist or an IFS therapist or someone who really understands the body to be able
Mhm.
to help you process this and give you some secure attachment and safety and connection so that you can actually get around the other side. You can actually allow yourself to feel the alarm and stay with it, because that's really how we heal. What the more we stay with it, the more we realize it's not this boogeyman that we've made it out to be
Yeah.
since we've been like 5 or 6 years old. It's like that's how you heal from anxiety, instead of just learning how to cope with the feeling or the thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I certainly have learned that the intelligence within my body is
Mm,
far greater than the intelligence in my head, because I
right.
can starve off the intelligence in my head and function much better.
Hmm.
But the intelligence within my body, that's far greater than anything I could imagine. Really, if I pay attention to that and I'm very compassionate with that, it will take care and it'll heal itself. So it was like I literally came back a completely different person. And
Yeah,
you were
that's amazing.
mentioning earlier, it sounds like I would pay you. I couldn't get back here fast enough to write to you and I didn't even know where to find you. So I was like, I have to find this guy.
Yeah,
I have to tell him how grateful I am to just have, put these tools in practice after being so crippled for 45 years. I was so excited to just find something, and then I sent that email off, and I was like, "I don't even know if it's gonna get to him, but I hope
yeah,
it does because I'm just so grateful." And now my life is so different. Like, my life is, I have a trip coming in November, I have another trip in March, I have another one in May. I was doing this whitewater rafting, I wanna try this, parasailing, and, like, literally, I feel so amazing. Like, I feel like I've wasted so much of my life now, I don't
same.
wanna waste another minute
Yeah.
with fear.
Same.
So
I think that's what happens, is when we live in our heads, time just flies by because we have no anchor to it. Like, it just feels like time has gone. So, and I feel exactly same way. I felt like I wasted so much time. I did a lot of things. I became a doctor and a stand-up comedian and a yoga teacher, but all the while I was just racked with this alarm that was in my
yeah,
system. So it just wasn't like I was ever really present with it. And I was always chasing something that I believed externally was going
yes,
to heal me. Right. So it's like, now I know, it's like, no, it just has to come from inside of you. And then your world actually sort of closes down first, because it's like, oh, this is difficult going back to this. But then it just
yes,
really opens up and you get this sort of 360-degree view of the world. It's like, yeah, I could do that, but I choose not to.
yeah,
Or, this is what I really want to do. So I'm going to move towards this kind of thing. So
yes,
you become in charge of it rather than, sort of the alarm being in charge of you.
yes. The amount of just even, you know, when I think about the
Mhm.
suffering that
Oh,
I went through for
oh,
decades and decades, and I think about, people out there, that are still struggling, that are suffering. Like, I couldn't go on the Queensway, like on our highway. I couldn't, whatever. I couldn't go in someone's car. I couldn't have them in my car. Like, there was just all these rules I had to live by just to survive because I suffered so much. And my
yeah,
life today is
totally,
completely.
yeah, totally agree. I remember there was one point where I couldn't leave the house. This is back when I was in Vancouver. It was like I knew I had to go and get my car insurance renewed because it renews every year, and I just couldn't leave the house. So it basically expired. So what I had to do was walk to the insurance company like 3 days later, or the insurance agent, get it, come back, put the sticker back on my car, and I was able to drive again. I just could not force myself to do it. And the other thing I used to do was I would get up at 2 or 3 in the morning after just being completely exhausted and demoralized. And I would go into the shower and I would turn it on cold and I would stay in there for like half an hour. And at the end of half an hour of like extremely cold water, I was able to kind of go, okay, because I think it brings you into your body. Like, you have no
Yeah,
choice, right? It's
yeah,
like, okay, I see, it takes you out of reverberating feedback, alarm, anxiety cycle that just never ends. And it just snowballs. It goes faster and faster and faster and faster. And there's no escape from it. And I think it's kind of like this thing where we worry because it gives us this temporary sense of making the uncertain a little more certain. But the certainty that we're creating is this horrible version of the future. And so and then we have to chase more worries because we feel terrible. And it just gets out of control on us because the worry, I think, as a child was a semi protective coping strategy. But then we ride it to the wheels fall off, and then we get into our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. And it just doesn't work anymore.
No, it's certainly true. Yeah. It's so
So,
frustrating when I think of that, actually,
I mean,
just the
when
amount of
people
time
ask
I
me in
did and
interviews, yeah, people ask me in interviews, like, what's your biggest regret? It's that I spent so long in that place. Like I spent
me
so
too.
long, and my relationships, because when you're in that state of alarm, you shut off. And I talk about this in the new book. It's like you shut off your social engagement system.
Yeah.
Eye contact, tone of voice, prosody of voice, body language, facial expression, all
Yes.
that stuff goes flat. So
Yes.
you can't connect with another person and they can't
Yeah.
connect with you. So you're in this sort of horrible state where you're trying to be connected on some level, maybe, or you're just frozen in that place and you can't get out of it. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do you get out of it? And you have to come back to yourself first, which is basically, a testament to what you've done. Like it sounds kind of patronizing, but I'm so proud of you for like just going on this trip to Europe and doing all this stuff. And it's been such a joy speaking with you, Danielle. Is there anything you want to like close with?
Um, well, if someone is considering getting your book, definitely get it. I buy it and I give it as gifts
As
and I
gifts. I've heard
recommend you
that.
all over. But also, the MBRX program was very important to me. Like those pieces of those, meditations, they were really critical for me. In addition to the book, those pieces were very important. I have spent years and years and years wasted in my life. And so it was the work that I did in the last, just few months is just so life changing. And I would say, like, yeah, if I have one piece of advice, I would say, you know, get out of your head and into your body. It's a lot smarter than your head. And follow people who've been successful at recovery because I've wasted so many years talking about this stuff that got me nowhere. And now I don't even talk about it. I don't need to.
Right.
Yeah, I don't need to talk about it anymore. I realize that, there's a lot of listening that I have to do inside and, the wisdom of my body and my intelligence of my body and it's just changing my life. I feel incredible. I feel grateful and I just can't wait to see what is in store for my life now. Yeah, I feel like I was just born now. It's like yeah, it's like I can't wait to see where I'm going with my new life.
That's such a great place to end. Thanks so much, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you as well.